trap.
Did you read anything about these spin-off movies we're supposed to maybe have?
Spin-off movies or the spin-off like television? Because I know there's a
They're
lot of
supposed to be
television
one-off
marketing, too.
movies that we don't know what the topic's going to be. So,
The one-off movies, they basically have scripts based on existing characters and character devices that they can spin off. Again, it depends what the popularity that comes out of this first movie is. And I think this is one of those movies where the initial 2 months of screening is pretty much going to make or break a lot of the decisions moving forward. Because they're not going to have time for a full 6-month cycle because they need to get stuff into production, because these movies are technically complicated to make.
they've already got a
Given the
director
script.
for the next two.
Yeah.
And what I'd heard, again, this is all supposition, it's all
Yeah.
predicated on exactly what he just said on how well this first movie does, is that there's a trilogy set up and probably 2 standalone spin-off movies, so that you have major stuff coming out every other year, and in between those years you have these spin-off movies. Something about Boba Fett, that's the rumor,
Yeah.
or something like that. Single character movies that can drive traffic and audience and money, of course.
Right,
And-
something that can be launched as a one-off, and if it becomes a vehicle for something
Right.
further, great, it gets brought back into the mainstream. If not, hey, we made a one-off. It's not like we haven't had those that failed.
Exactly right, exactly
So-
right.
And they're bringing Star Wars back into with a television presence on the Disney Channel and Disney XD as well. They have the Clone Wars for a while. They had that, and now Rebels has just started this year. I've got a 7-year-old. She's an addict. Every Monday night, she's stoked because it's a Star Wars Rebels, and she's been really ticked off because it's very intermittent. It's not every single Monday night. So I mean, which is different. I mean, they didn't have that when we were kids. I mean,
Yeah. How many of you out there have watched The Clones, the cartoon?
everyone's nice.
So just about everybody.
I am so impressed with the content. So we had the Star Trek panel, right? We talked about what is such a bummer about the new movies with Star Trek is they left so much out of what Gene Roddenberry wanted in terms of pushing the envelope of what you could say in front of other people that were watching you about the universe that we live in and the things that we need fixing. But in Clone Wars, boy, they did not hold back in terms of anything. And I think it's really exciting to see how much kids are getting that's not just clone troopers shooting at Sith or separatist drones.
So let's talk briefly here. Who here has read anything in the expanded universe, the books or whatnot? So about half of you. Do you guys consider that to be part of the true Star Wars universe? Are those real stories from the Star Wars universe as far as you're concerned? No? Anybody else? Ideas? No? Who did I gave Canon to somebody?
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm a Latter-day Saint, and you'll know that the idea of what's in the canon, what's out of the canon is very relevant for a
People know what
Latter-day,
canon means?
right?
Okay.
Right. So the canon is what's officially acceptable. So for the entire rest of Christianity, they say the Book of Mormon is totally not in the canon, right? And then give Mormons a hard time about that. So being an LDS guy, I very much see a lot of what's, and maybe even all of what's not in the original 3 movies as canon, simply because if you love Star Wars, right, and you think that these people that start this adventure tell something about the world in which we live in that can be appreciated, then things like Knights of the Old Republic, which has existed in the comic books and in the video games, and I think done really well in both formats. Legacy was another one, I think. Cade Skywalker ends up in that chronology of life. There's some really, really well done stuff by people that have grown up as fans of Star Wars that have really not treated it with kid gloves, but done enough of their homework to know how to do it right. And I think that what's nice about that is it kept the universe alive long enough for us to try to get another 3 set of movies, and then kept alive long enough again after the life support that those movies put the franchise on to arrive at this point, right, where Disney pays $4 billion to acquire. And maybe it's a point where Disney felt like if they didn't do it then the universe was at risk of not being relevant anymore.
For reality's purposes, the people, Disney, have made a statement, and their statement has been that the expanded universe is not canon in any way, shape, or form.
Because they don't own it.
But they reserve the right, actually they do own it, all that stuff had to be licensed through George Lucas.
Those are all movie
Exactly. So
tie-ins.
all that stuff, all that information
Is
is
it really?
absolutely owned by Disney at the moment. They could use any of it if they wanted, and they've stated that although it is
The
not
Dark
canon,
Horse stuff?
Everything except
That all had
Splinter
to
in
be
the Mind's
approved by
Eye
Lucas.
is now owned
The
by
approval
Disney.
process through Dark Horse to
Yeah.
Lucas was insane.
he
Yeah.
was very careful.
Yeah.
So that's right. They've made the statement that none of those works, including Knights of the Old Republic or any of the expanded universe novels, even the stuff by Timothy Zahn that was done very early on, none of that stuff is canon. But they reserve the right to use concepts, ideas, and characters from those works. So having said that, who knows what they're actually going to do? Who knows what we're actually going to see when the actual movie comes out? But I think it's very interesting that they sort of threw the expanded universe on the ground like that.
Well, they excommunicated it. I mean, because I'm thinking about right, so I'm thinking about this idea of canon because I'm LDS, and we just excommunicated Kate Kelly and John DeLynn. And it sounds like I said that carelessly, but I didn't. And so there's this larger conversation of, is excommunication barbaric? Does it still have a place in modern religion or culture or right? Because, I mean, you could continue to go to church even if you're excommunicated, whereas previously, if they excommunicated you, they attempted to kill you, right? When Martin Luther was excommunicated by the Catholic Church, they hunted him down, and they just couldn't find the guy. So that's interesting that their first, and it's a very religious thing to do. The new pope is in town, and they excommunicate everybody that's not in the original canon.
Yeah.
And then they say, now we're going to write the rules. That's really
But
fascinating.
the oddity there is, on a completely different track, they just poured just shy of $500 million into the infrastructure for their online games. Which
$500 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
They basically, in anticipation of the movie, they quadrupled their capacity for services.
Wow, I did not know that.
And that is global.
That is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they want people in Tunisia to be able to play on par with the folks here.
As they should.
Well,
And-
Disney's never stinted on
No.
any sort of tie-in. If there's a tie-in to be made, they're going to wring it out of it.
Yeah, they're good at that.
But the emphasis on a lot of the expanded universe stuff, especially in the online presence, the MMOs and everything, it tells me that they see some value there, just maybe not,
If they put a
cinematic.
$500 million into it, they clearly see,
They see
money. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because they know they're going to make that back in 3 years. That's
Well,
a no-brainer.
It won't take
Their long-term plan, so it's all.
Well, and it won't. So that's 0.9 of 1 week of Disney's annual revenue. So I'm in a previous life, I'm a financial guy. I used to manage money before I shut down the firm to go on the book tour, and so that is less than 1 week of revenue that they put into.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's
Revenue or profit?
revenue.
Oh, well, that makes
Right.
sense then.
So this cash is coming in. What do you do with $49 billion that comes in every single year? Oh well. But I think that the fact that the money was spent says that. So part of what this conversation, in terms of what's going on in the LDS church, is the idea of border maintenance, and I feel like that's what they've done is they've shored up and they've said this is the official canon, but we also have a guard at the door, and if we feel like something that's going on out there in the expanded universe is worth letting it, well then we simply have a roll-up door there, and we'll throw that up and we'll welcome it in as long as it's profitable.
Yeah, I think if they see something in the expanded universe that they think they can really use and leverage, they'll probably use it.
But
Yeah.
from their perspective, I can see why they would do that, because, for example, like the Throne trilogy, I love, but that takes place literally like days after the end of Return of the Jedi. So if they want to take a different tack story-wise with the new films that they're doing,
Right.
they want to be weighed down by the stories that are already in.
They also don't want to reinvent the wheel, too. They've put together a really aggressive timeline. If,
Oh, yeah.
if the projected timeline is to be believed. It's difficult to come up with, having
Every
to come
other-
up with this whole plot.
Yeah.
Having this immense expanded universe to kind of rob from as they need ideas is a huge time saver. I mean, somebody going, banging their heads on the table at the idea meeting going, I'm nothing, I'm tapped
It's
out.
almost hard to create 3 new scripts that don't and somehow
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
concepts from the expanded
Yeah.
universe who have sort of soaked the ideas of Star Wars clearly now for 40 years, almost 40 years.
I have a question for the panel. I came late, but George Lucas, when he was interviewed for Time way back in the late 70s, his idea for Star Wars was to start out in the middle of the story and then tell somewhere down the line the first
What's the exact question?
Well, I think she said, are we going to get rid of Jedi and Sith? Right? Did you say that the droids will be the only thing left?
Right, his idea was to have a storyline where we had the middle,
Yep.
now we have the beginning.
Yep.
And we're gonna have the next 3 movies will be the end of his.
Yeah, his original story outline was something called the Journal of the Wills. And he had a 9-part series in his brain like that. But I don't think any of it had anything to do with just becoming droids at the end. His theory was that the 2 droids would be the only characters in all 9 movies, and they would be the storytellers.
Oh.
Like a
R2D2 and
framing-
Right, and
C-3PO.
C-3PO would be the eyes for all 9 movies, the only characters that would be in all 9. But I don't think anything about getting rid of the actual human characters was part of that.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm thinking that George's vision for the last 3, Disney isn't going to care so much about that. They're going to want to tell their own stories. Yeah, it's all there.
They paid $4 billion to George
Yeah.
Lucas.
Yeah. They can do whatever they
No,
want
they
now.
said thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna help our story now.
Yeah.
Well, these second set of 3 movies have been really great. Those last 3 movies might have gotten made by George Lucas.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe, yeah. I think we've understood that George Lucas is an idea guy. He has superb ideas. He's just not a very good director.
Or dialogue.
Oh, right. You know,
Or dialogue writer.
the best movies were the ones that he didn't direct. You know, Irvin Kershner directed the second
The
one.
fact that I think Caston is co-writing this one, it actually makes me a little hopeful.
That's what's so.
That is what has elevated the whole level for many people.
Because Caston's helped. He rewrote it actually. He rewrote the script. Yeah, there's actually a script that came in and he helped rewrite it. So.
And then the fact that Disney was able to pull off a space opera with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
A lot
Oh.
of people saw that and thought, maybe Disney can do a space opera.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Well, if you look at the technical cross-tracking, that's actually one of the concerns when they made this announcement was the guys in charge of Marvel, the guys in charge of the new Star Wars property actually had to sit down and it's like, okay, we have to be able to cross-utilize here, but we can't poach because, let's face it, this upcoming Star Wars movie is probably the single most fast-tracked technical movie ever produced. It's like the fact that they went from concept art to production to CGI that quickly shows that Disney's not afraid to spend money.
No.
It's like, okay, we need a company to do this, go buy me one.
Yep.
They
And-
think they're going to make $1 billion worldwide on the first movie.
Yeah.
They said probably did the marketing for John Carter food.
Oh my God.
They'll probably make what they've spent on acquiring the franchise in the first movie.
Yeah, when everything is said and
When,
done.
yeah.
You mean with the merchandising?
Well, right,
Yes,
when you
yes.
include the merchandising, then there's the merchandising for the television shows.
Yep.
And then there's also going to be a park presence.
Yeah.
Hollywood Studios is half closed now because they're putting in more of like, not a Star Wars land per se,
Yep.
but much more of a presence.
Well,
just
and they own
in
ABC.
Florida, yeah.
And ESPN as
Yes.
property. So, like, when you think about the synergy of being able to advertise on ESPN and ABC, right, as the owner of the Star Wars property is really awesome.
It's going to be really interesting to see where
Yeah.
that goes, just in that area.
Well, why don't we
too.
talk about that? You're a Disney
I
fan.
am. I'm a Disney fan.
And I am a Disney fan, honestly, from a long ways back. I think they used to have a very good DNA and a very good culture over there. I think they lost their way a bit for a while, but I think they are good holders of this wand. I honestly believe if any one organization is going to try to propel the Star Wars universe back to glory, Disney is maybe the group to do it. But being that you're a Disney fan, why don't you tell us what you think might happen now that Disney owns the product?
It's going to be really interesting, I think. Particularly, I think we're going to see a lot more in terms of an actual physical presence of Star Wars at the parks, which is something that I know I would have, as like a 12, 13
Yeah.
year old girl, I would have fainted dead away if I'd been able to go someplace. Like
And
we
see
went-
Yoda.
Oh my God, I would have been like, just thrilled. So I think that's going to be something that I don't think we ever saw coming. I don't think we ever really
Interactive,
saw coming.
something
right,
interactive, right.
Which, we've seen what Universal's done with Harry Potter.
Yes.
And they've really set the bar really high. So I think Disney may be thinking of using Star Wars because they can't compete in terms of Harry Potter. They can't compete in the fantasy in that particular world because they don't have the rights to anything like that. And J.R.R. Tolkien would come back and hunt down the mouse, I think, if they tried. And so I think science fiction, this is where they need to make that mark.
Yeah.
And I think this is them kind of towing that line that Universal drew in the sand when they opened the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So it could be phenomenal, provided they don't screw it up, because they've done that in the past too. I mean, the original Hollywood Studios had 4 things in it.
They've got more money.
They do. They have a lot more money now than they did before. I guess a lot of that also depends on how things go over in China with the new park that's opening there. Paris is still struggling, and they have another Asian market as well that they are pouring a ton of money into right now. Disney Seas, I think.
Yes, but that's making
It's making money now.
that's making a huge
Yes.
profit because it's targeted as an at the adult audience. So
And you know they have to do it. I'm just waiting for one of the parks to have a Star Wars bar theme, like, you know.
Like
The
the
cantina, yes.
Oh,
There's a lot of speculation that's one of the things. I don't know, D23.
Cantina in every major city.
Oh, that'd be great.
D23 is
Oh,
their big, huge
yeah.
convention
Yeah.
that's coming up this summer. They do it every other year. So, I mean, I know Star Wars was hinted at the last D23. They had the R2 and they had, you know, the boxes set there, but not much. So I'm betting this is the year that they're going to kind of rip those boxes open and show us
I
concept plans.
Champion Star Wars for quite a few years.
They've
It's
had a
really long time ago, I
presence.
remember going down for a Star Wars weekend.
It's always had a presence, but I think it's really going to be much more.
Like the
Oh.
Wizarding World.
Right, it's
Right.
going to be much more of its own force, like, very much like this.
I can tell you that there are a number of people in very specific industries that recently have signed very large and lucrative NDAs with Disney, and these are guys that do things like maglev and
Really?
you know, yeah. So I think that if they're going to do this, we are not going to get anything but bleeding edge.
It is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Disney takes its own sweet time.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's tempting to say when you look at all the money that's involved and the fact that they know that we will go see it.
They've got Marvel and Star Wars. It's licensed to print money.
It is. But I'd like to think that as you're talking about what it looks like at the parks, so an idea that's really exciting to me and my wife right now is this idea of de-porning art. That as an American consumer, we have really taken in all this porn in terms of we're consuming things, but we're not interacting with it. And so you look at the romance genre of books, and you get someone that I've looked on Goodreads, and people have read like hundreds and hundreds of books in a year. And I think you're not interacting with the material. If you're able to read 500 books in a year, you did not participate with that book. You consumed it, and then you moved on. And as we've gone around the comic convention circuit, we'll see somebody come by the table and they'll look at every art piece, but if I talk to them, they will run away. Because I've like caught them in this act of them letting the art do something to them, but by golly, they sure don't want to have a conversation about it because that requires that you participate. So the fact to me that the optimistic side of me says that with Disney wanting to bring an experience, that we will finally get to participate. We can stop treating Star Wars like porn and go participate and take pictures with Yoda and have a fan experience and go on a ride. And I'm excited to think that we'll get a Star Wars world like we have the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. That gives all of us the opportunity to participate in the Star Wars universe in an authentic way that brings real memories.
I'm 50, I'd go.
Well, that's one question I have. Going along with this theme of what is Disney going to do with the marketing, what do you think that they're going to think about in terms of age brackets? Because there's almost this generation of kids that obviously, you know, that's probably coming with like start with Legos and the cartoons. But then there's people, you know, my generation and people who've grown up with it from this, you know, the original films.
Well, when comparing to Harry Potter, they know at Disney that they have a more robust large demographic. Harry Potter will have a large demographic, but Star Wars, it's long and
It's multi-generational.
Yeah, who hasn't grown up with Star Wars since it was released?
My
There are no
My
kids in this room
students
today.
now.
Who knows this?
But they
Look at the
have,
age
if
of
they have
people in
Clone
this room
War,
right now.
I mean,
All right, I teach 8th grade, I teach 14-year-olds, and there's been a gap, actually, because when I mentioned Star Wars, like, oh, those movies sucked. I'm like, no, not those. Yeah, and I go, the real movies, and they look at me like I've just grown another head. I'm like, with like Han Solo, they're like, oh no, the other movies sucked, I never bothered. I'm like, I literally, I think I went, okay, I've just been killed. You guys have killed me.
Yeah.
And they just laugh. But, because they're 14 and
But they
heartless.
at least had Clone Wars.
Right,
Yeah,
well,
but,
yeah.
so many of them, I mean, that just sort of was you had to have cable for that, and, the whole thing, and,
Everyone
but
has
I
So now
think-
it's on Netflix?
Now it is, yeah, but,
My dad dragged me to the original. It was re-released in theaters. My dad dragged me. I didn't want to go. By the end of it, it was like we were saying before, I was hooked.
When the original movie first came out, there was a trailer, and everyone in the audience laughed when Darth Vader started breathing. I said, whoa, cool, I want to see it. My friend just laughed and thought I was an idiot. She became a bigger Star Wars fan than I was. And then when George Lucas made the mistake of tinkering around with the original three, I was so angry because those were my childhood.
but at the same time, how many of us still paid the money to go see them in the theaters?
Yeah.
Technically,
And how many of us also kind of got the goosebumps when the opening bars started for the music? I'm like, oh, this is so cool!
no, technically I had a friend that worked at the theater, so I got in free.
I
Before everyone
remember
else.
seeing that movie, the first movie, when it first came out, over and over again, to the point where we were doing a Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of thing.
Well, I'll tell you, my stepfather, my grandfather, and my uncle were all projectionists at the Golf Mill Theater here and at the old Sunset Drive-In, which is now gone. So I'm not exaggerating. I think I saw Empire Strikes Back in that theater about 20 times. 20 times.
Did they do the old projectionist trick where they save small snippets for
No.
themselves?
Oh, wow.
I know, I think it was Dustin, because my
Maybe they
parents
did,
were,
yeah.
one of my parents' first
You
dates
could
was.
snippets of film.
That would be worth a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, and so for me, my moment is, so John Cobb Jr. and David Ray Griffin are in the world of process thought and process philosophy, pretty prolific guys. David Ray Griffin did a bunch on 9/11. He's published some pretty condemning things, I guess, about 9/11 and who is really responsible. But I one of the degrees I got was at the Claremont School of Theology, and so me and my wife invited John Cobb Jr. and his wife at, I think he was 87 at the time, to go see Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and we went on this double date with this, master of the universe, some of the greatest thought that's ever happened, and then went home and talked about how to raise kids and philosophy that was in the film, and I get that there was a lot wrong with the films, but I don't know. To me as a fan, I want to look there and say, well, what's great about it and what can I hold on to? And then literally my brain just erases every other moment as if it never existed. And so I don't have to be concerned about what they did wrong because they did this right.
Well, as fans, we all went and saw the first 3 films, right?
Yeah.
Everybody here saw them. Most people would say they're not good movies. If those had been the first 3 movies, we wouldn't have gone any
sure.
further. We'd have been done.
So how much of a dead whale do you think this third set will drag from the second?
Really good question. Did you hear what she said? She says, how much, because those first 3 movies weren't very good, were critically panned for the most part, and let down most Star Wars fans, even though we went and saw them multiple times because it's still Star Wars. How much will that hold back the rest of the films that are coming out? Will you go? Will there be people who say, well, the first 3 weren't very good, I'm not going to go see this next one?
You mean the second 3, not the first 3?
What we mean episode 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody would give the first one a chance.
Yeah,
But on the other hand, those second, that 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
In 1979, those would have been amazing.
Oh, 3,
No, you're talking about 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and so the series is done in medias res, so they start in the middle and then they went back and did, right.
So I'm talking about the second set of Star Wars.
Episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, episodes 1, 2, and 3. If those movies had come out in 1979, it would have been amazing.
Yes.
Only because of the effects.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The storytelling was not very good.
But Revenge of the Sith has some really good in terms of when Sidious and Anakin and Dooku, right? They're all there, right? And Anakin has this conundrum between what he feels the Force is telling him and what Darth Sidious is telling him. And that's obviously the moment that takes him down a road that he obviously doesn't come back for several movies from. So I think there's really good Star Wars that's in those episodes. We just have to plug our ears when Padme and Anakin are on the screen together that it's just so bad. Well, and it's like it's.
And I still think that you and my brother really did encapsulate.
Well, I watch Lord of the Rings and I fast forward Frodo. Right? So anytime Frodo shows up on the screen, I fast forward, and I love Lord of the Rings that way. And so for me, I do the same thing with Star Wars. If Anakin and Padme come on the screen, I fast forward, and then I love Star Wars. So I don't see that I owe the franchise that 30 minutes of my life that sucks, right? And I can still be a fan.
To get back to your question, the prequels are not going to affect the opening of the next movie whatsoever.
At all.
No, everyone's going to go see it. It's going to be a happening again. It's going to be people showing up in costumes, and it's going to be an event where lobbies are filled. And the first movie is going to be a success just because it's going to be a success.
There's a change that's happened though within that, because when 1, 2, and 3 came out, it was the midnight movie thing.
Well,
Which is, I went to everyone. I went to Excellence at midnight. Because if I didn't go at midnight, it's kind of like I didn't go. Now, within the last couple of years, that has gradually moved forward. So it was 10 o'clock the evening before, 8 o'clock the evening before, 7 o'clock the evening before. So a lot of the media position, look at these crazy people out at the movies at midnight. It is kind of gone.
I mean, are they gonna do the first showing at like Thursday at,
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you a little issue. Clearly the new movie is supposed to come out in December of this year. But I just read an article yesterday that J.J. Abrams is pushing for a May opening now, or a June opening.
because of the tradition
Maybe because of the tradition, and that you can have lines outside in cold weather states. You can't do. No one's going to sit outside in Chicago, or very few people.
I was going to say no one?
Well, there'll be
No,
some.
fewer people.
500 instead of 7?
It also goes back to the issue that you were talking about, where they have pushed this timetable so hard by throwing a lot of money at it and hiring the very best people in every area to try to get this thing onto the screen as quickly as they could after they spent their $4 billion. If they can get this film out in spring of this year, that's a remarkable feat for a movie of that complexity.
Well, there's the problem. April, good. Mid-June, good. May.
But May is tradition. That's all the other movies
The
have been
problem
released
is,
in May.
May 4th,
Is.
they wind up going against their other juggernaut, which is the last thing they want to do.
That's the next.
That's the next Avengers,
right?
comes out on May 4th. That's part of the reason that the Abrams would like a much earlier release, but either he's got to come in early April and burn through a month, of good sales before Avengers release, or he's got to give them at least 90 days after the drop of Avengers, because otherwise, while it is nice when a studio dominates the entire movie theater industry for a few weeks, they do lose money when that happens, because their two primary products are now in competition. That's not what they want.
It's better to dominate a year rather than
Right.
1 month.
Yeah.
They want to dominate a year. Dominating 3 months doesn't do them any good.
Because people like me have to make the decision of who do you get the babysitter for.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Whereas
mean, it sounds awful, but that's the
you hit the
truth.
beginning of December and you look back and it's like, so for the first 11 months, we dominated screens for 7. That's a year shareholders go
That's
home happy.
freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's even more complicated is not only do you have Avengers in May, you've got Ant-Man in July.
Yep.
So there's 2 films that could potentially be competing against each other.
Well, that's going back to what we were discussing earlier. The camps, they have to cooperate.
Yes.
And this is actually a very odd position for Disney to be in, because it was always, this time frame we're focusing on our animated stuff, this time frame we're
right.
focusing on our touchstone, this time frame we're going to give Angelina Jolie a role in a classic Disney story, and what the hell were we thinking?
What?
So on and so
you
forth.
didn't like that?
No,
Really?
I didn't even see it.
couldn't stand it.
Oh, wow.
It took me 6 times to get through that on Amazon. But they're very focused traditionally. I mean, that has always been Disney's strategy is while they have many irons in the fire at once, because they are very specific when they market. Somebody asked earlier about the demographics. It's like, trust me, there's a team within marketing whose sole focus is from ages 0 through 9, and then from ages 9 through 12, and then blah, blah. And then crossing that, it's like, how do we promote this to the LGBTQ community? How do we promote this to, if there's a community, there's at least one marketing person at Disney whose sole job it is to make sure every Disney product somehow appeals to that market.
And Star Wars is Disney's ace in the hole to battle the princesses.
Yep.
Because that's the one thing that Disney has always been very, not bad with, but never been as strong with gearing toward boys. And this is what they figure.
Oh,
Marvel,
sure.
Because they can't have a presence in the parks for Marvel, because Universal owns that right. So Star Wars is like their way to really hook the boys in on that. So, though my daughter would like to know why Sabine is not available for the toys, because she's very upset about that.
Question?
One of the characters from Star Wars
What
Rebels.
does the panel think the overall impact of what Disney's done and what Star Wars moves up to the rest of the science fiction community with sparking new projects, getting new science fiction shows on mainstream television, or new projects pushed through overall? What do you think that's going to do?
Are you asking us to predict?
Yeah, what do you think it's going to
Space operas are going to be the thing for a while.
Yeah.
It will.
Clearly, when Star Wars came out, it triggered a deluge of television shows, mostly that failed, trying to follow that same success pattern. Anywhere they think they can make money, so if this film is highly successful and critically acclaimed, you'll see space operas again. You'll see that. And you'll see more movies more than anything else. You can't even list on a list of 100 the number of movies that came out from 1977 trying to copy the Star Wars recipe to make money. Everybody was doing it. Even big-name directors were trying to cash in on that theory. So I have to think that same process is going to occur again. Maybe even beforehand. Maybe instead of happening after the crest, after the film is released, there's always a buzz in the air now about Star Wars. How many of you have seen the trailer for Star Wars? It hasn't even been in the theaters yet. It's all over the internet. So there's buzz about this movie before the movie has even come out. And you can probably start making films based on the buzz.
Honestly, I think in terms of like television shows and stuff like that, we're doing pretty well as a genre. I mean, look around on what's on even on regular channels now. I mean, it depends on, do you count Vampire Diaries? Do you count Supernatural? They're all under the speculative fiction umbrella. As, as a culture, science fiction and fantasy, we're doing, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Well,
We're
and
running the production companies.
yeah, if you look at the success of Arrow and Flash, right, and then Gotham, my understanding of Gotham is it is struggling very, very much so. That we now see that it's not, is it geek or is it not geek? It's, is it good? Is it well done, or does it suck? And right in this day and age, with the rise of the convention, there's enough people out there that appreciate a place to be themselves, that there's now room in pop culture for that stuff to be on the screen as long as it's done well.
I think also, though, we've raised the bar a little bit, because one of the things that I didn't like in 77, 78 was, there were tons of movies that came out. Oh my God, some of them were garbage.
Right, yes.
I mean, they were visually unappealing, poor stories, bad acting, third-rate actors. That's 2 hours of my life I want back. And I think we're going to see, we will still see that same basic, we will see knockoffs, but we have raised the bar requirements high enough that Disney's cognizant of the fact that they have to raise that bar.
Yeah.
Everybody else realizes, I can't put a guy in a hefty bag and call it a monster anymore. I need a CGI budget, or I can't come to the party. I need a real script, or I
Even
can't
Doctor
come to
Who
the
has an
party.
effects budget now.
Yeah.
Well, you say that, but watch the Netflix streams the month before
Yes.
Star Wars movies comes out.
Yes.
And then you'll have every
Every D
movie, yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, some of those are just, like Mystery Science Theater 2005.
Right.
You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. But
It's what you can make for $8 million.
When the first Star Wars movie came out, and I mean before, so get it right, I had seen the trailers on TV, and they looked awful. I mean, they're showing this space bear, and it looked real crummy. And I thought, oh God, this is going to be a real crummy movie. But I went to see it anyway. And from the moment that the credits go up and the spaceships come over the horizon and fill the screen,
With the John Williams score.
I sat there transfixed. There was no doubt in my mind that this was going to be one of the greatest movies I've ever seen.
Have you guys heard of the George Lucas Steven Spielberg bet? For those of you who don't know it, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were making Star Wars and Close Encounters at the same time. And they're friends, close friends. And George Lucas was having a crisis of conscience. He just didn't think his movie was working out the way he wanted it to be. He was fighting with the studio over money. He was very upset about it and thought that he was going to flop and never be able to direct a film again. So he went and saw Steven Spielberg while he was filming Close Encounters of the Third Kind and said, he spilled his guts and said, I really think I'm in trouble here. Steve, do you have any advice? He goes, you don't need any help. You're going to be a huge hit. You're going to be a bigger hit than my movie. Matter of fact, I'll give you 15% of my movie if you give me 15% of yours. And George is like, done. And to date, I think Steven Spielberg has pocketed $70 million from that bet.
George Lucas made good? Wow.
Steven Spielberg made good on 15% of Star Wars.
And Lucas made good on 15.
Not nearly as good as, clearly, Close Encounters, good movie, didn't make the money that Star Wars made.
No, but I'm saying maybe he's got 15%.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They made that's an actual thing. And George Lucas has to send him a check every year, and he's happy to do it, he says.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, my experience is a little bit different. I'm a little bit older, I think, than some of you guys.
What?
So I was 22 when I saw Star Wars.
So you're 10 years older.
Just a kid. So I didn't grow up with Star Wars.
Right.
However, I was an avid science fiction fan. And there weren't any good science fiction films. I'd still watch them. But if you go back to the 50s reruns, I mean, the cream of the crop is the name Earth Stood Still, a Forbidden Planet, and maybe Earth versus the Flying Saucers, and that's about it. Everything else is much worse. So the night Star Wars, I saw the preview a few months before, and everybody in the theater around me was going, oh, that looks weird. I was going, well, that looks interesting. I want to see it. So the night it opened, I saw the 7 o'clock show at the Eaton's Plaza.
So you saw it before it got big.
Yes.
See, I saw it after it got big.
I saw it the opening night, and I had the same exact reaction. This film has just changed everything. And so many of the scenes in the film were stuff I read about in books. A bar full of aliens sitting around drinking. It just blew my mind.
I know, it's very guttural. See, I was 12, so I was the perfect age. I was, my 12-year-old brain was targeted for it. You had a 12-year-old brain at age 22, right?
Absolutely.
It was funny.
So,
1 second.
what you say was interesting because 4 days before the movie came out, the original movie came out, Time Magazine pops at the cover of Time Magazine's an X-Wing fighter that says, best movie of the year, and there was kind of a question to it. But like a 6-page article on Star Wars before it hit the theater. And then the night of, always being a science fiction fan, my friend Bert and I go to the theater to see the movie, and the line is around the theater. It's the Eaton's Theater, and the line, it was the Eaton's too. So, circular theater, circular line, and the manager is out talking to everybody at the back of the line saying, don't worry folks, we'll get you in for the 10 o'clock show if you're in this part of the line. And we showed up at 6:45 for the 7 o'clock show. And already there was a buzz, already there was a groundswell. So it's not like there was no anticipation of this movie, like it was a sleeper or anything. It was going from a week before the movie opened. People were looking for it when it first came out.
Yes.
I think for people who weren't as heavily into SF as maybe my husband here, which is permanent, but for those of us who weren't as heavily into SF, dragged me by the hair. I'm like, Star what? Star Wars? How can Star Wars? That's ridiculous. But for me, it was a complete revelation because when the ship started coming up, and I'm like, I just remember my jaw dropping, and I think, okay, this is what they're talking about. I'm not sure how that kind of excitement for a non-SF fan is going to relate to the current crowd.
Let me ask you a question. For people in your generation, this was before my time, but 1969, 2001, A Space Odyssey came out. I was only 4 years old. I clearly didn't see this in the theater. But that was really the introduction of real special effects and a real science fiction film done on a big budget.
Yeah, I
And
forgot to mention that.
yeah, and I'm wondering, for people who saw 2001, if that had already imprinted on you, this is what a science fiction movie should be.
We were dragged by my senior English class, and I hated every minute of it.
So you saw it and didn't like it.
Saw it, didn't like it.
I didn't like 2001.
Didn't like 2001?
Yeah,
And
it's
as I've
terrible.
gotten older, I appreciate it more, but it does not
I've never
stand
made
the
it
test
through.
of Star
Yeah,
Wars.
I just think it's terrible.
I agree, I don't think 2001.
But I think the larger point is that I don't think that Star Wars has to be made in a way that everyone likes it. I think it's silly to think that we could come up with, as great as Star Wars is, that every single person that's been born on the earth is going to go see this and like. There's a reason that there are fandoms that they reach, right? They reach certain people, certain things speak to. I think they're going to do it well enough that everyone in this room is going to think they've done a tremendous job, and a lot of people out there. But I think it's silly to think that they could craft it in such a way that every single man, woman, and child is a fan.
Yeah, I'm still gonna have kids next year who have absolutely no idea what
Right?
I'm talking about.
Right, and they have poor taste. It's not that they're bad people. They just
It's not their fault. The poor neglected children, I do what I can, but,
Tell us what you really think.
no, I know. They're very
On
sheltered.
the subject of what should be in the new movie, I saw a video that was on YouTube of a woman speaking and saying the things that she thought should be in the movie or not be in it. And I wish I had looked at it last night so I had refreshed my memory about the list, but it was things like, we want to see something new with the Force. We just don't want to see the choking and some of the small things and whatnot. I mean, does the panel have an opinion of something that should be in the movie or shouldn't be elaborated on that we haven't really seen in the past? But we don't want to see a rehash of all the same, little details just in a different format and a different plot. We want to actually see somehow the Force expanded on.
Like an evolution of the Force, is what you're talking about?
Yeah, to some extent. In some cases, yeah, an evolution of the Force, and in some cases, just a facet of something that we haven't seen before because it just didn't happen to be in the first movie.
Well,
Or not, or something that shouldn't be in it because it's been overused, and I wish I could remember better.
here's part of the issue with that. There was a lot of criticism we all had 4, 5, and 6, and we knew what the Force was from that, and that was basically Darth Vader's neck pinches and Palpatine's ability to throw purple, energy around. And that was pretty much it. I mean, we knew Yoda could do some fine-tuned things. He was trying to teach Luke to do some fine-tuned things, lift and juggle. And when, we get the episodes 1, 2, 3, and they're basically flinging the Force, and I'm going to zip my zipper with the Force, I'm going to turn the light switch on with the Force, I'm going to cut my peach with the Force. And we never really got a good internal of the movie explanation of, okay, so you guys were this, and then by the time Luke grows up, you guys can't figure out how to open and close a visor with the Force.
That actually kind of made sense to me, though.
Yeah,
'Cause I actually got that there, since so many of the Jedi had been hunted
But
down and killed.
that was the thing. Everybody
yeah.
drew the conclusion that was not exactly stated. So now we've got a much smaller population of Force practitioners at the end of episode 6. It depends what they give us starting there. Because again, there has to be some, if the Force ebbs and strengthens over time, there has to be some reason. And there has to be some reason in a context that those of us familiar with the Star Wars universe will buy.
It'll be interesting, because, Luke wasn't exactly the best trained Jedi.
Oh.
And, if he's kind of the founding force of this new order.
I mean, that's part of the problem. He's the B team. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a nice kid, but...
But it's great, but
Well,
But it wasn't complete.
Well, and that's why I think Cade in the Legacy, has anyone read that comic book, Star Wars Legacy? It's really, really well done. And, Cade has to decide, for himself which side he wants to be on. And, he's a guy that's used the Force almost in a way that, like, if you could see the future, you would go bet on the stock market. And you can really feel good about the wealth you accumulated because it was, right? So that's Cade. But there's a scene in the Clone Wars where Anakin gets brought to this place and kind of has to go through a Force trials, right? There's a Jedi trials to say whether or not you're ready. But
There's
then,
one in Rebels too.
right, where, yes, that's right. I remember
They just
that.
did it like 2 episodes ago, I think.
And for the first time ever, right, so this guy that brings Anakin, he says, you are the chosen one. You will bring balance to the Force. You need to take my place. I'm going to die. And, right, he has a daughter that is on the light side and a son that is on the dark side. And I've never seen as clear of explanation as to what's required in terms of this idea of the balance of the Force. And I'd like to think that we have that available to us going forward in terms of understanding, like, truly what the Force is about and where the boundaries are and where the dangers are.
And Rebels actually, since this is they actually put Rebels out in anticipation
Yeah.
of the new movies.
Yeah.
They actually had a trial, Ezra's
Yep.
trial. It was very, very interesting. And I love the one scene where they walk in, it's a temple, and, Kanan sits down, the master sits down, and he goes, it's in
Yeah,
there.
go.
And he's like, well, what am I going to find? He's like, everything and nothing. He's like, well, aren't you coming with me? He's like, no, my place is here. And you look on either side of Kanan, and there are 2 skeletons sitting cross-legged on the ground. He goes, I'm here with the master. My place is here with the masters of those, whose students didn't make it, whose students failed. And you really it drives home, like, crap. Ezra could die, and Kanan's just going to sit there and die too.
Yeah.
And I looked at my daughter, who's 7. I'm like, well, this just got dark.
No wonder it took so long for another Jedi. My gosh.
Do you foresee the presence of Sith?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
They're already in.
We already know that.
They're both dead.
Oh, no, there's more.
There's always
And there's always
one
2.
master and one apprentice.
Well, okay, so we're not considering Darth to be an apprentice anymore?
We already know there's Sith in the next movie. That's
Yeah.
Well, and what was really great about the Clone Wars is to see, like, Ventress is still alive, right? I mean, technically, in the Star Wars. So, the idea that somebody could go be a Sith and then not, I mean, to me, that's a little mind-blowing, that they wouldn't get hunted down. And so I think there's a lot that's available in terms of...
I would love to see her as a live-action character. That would be awesome.
Well, I think she's the Harley Quinn of Star Wars, right? Because so there's that scene between Black Canary and Harley Quinn where Harley Quinn realizes that Black Canary's pregnant, and they
have a body moment.
Right? And so I think that I'd love to think that the Ventress, that there's a lot more to her that's going to be out there. And boy, it makes it hard to be light side or dark side when you're just a human being. Well, not a human being, but when you're human, as much human. Right. Yes. When you live on Earth and you're not perfect.
Yeah.
I think you can interpret the Force as being stronger or weaker depending on the number of its followers. Because if you look at fantasy, Michael Moorcock's Eternal Champion series and everything else, the gods only have power because you worship them. If you stop worshiping them, they will fade away. But if you worship them, that's how they draw their power. They draw it from you. The Force draws its power from the users.
Well, and of course, going back to that one amazing allocated user, like, stuck me in, the Force is, what binds the universe together, right? And it's about life, right? So whenever you have destruction of life, it seems like the Force would add with it.
Yes.
I brought the master and apprentice, there's always 2, but there isn't always 2 because we have the Inquisitor. Isn't he a Sith?
Yes.
The Emperor has lots of apprentices. He just doesn't necessarily let his apprentices know there's other apprentices.
Well, it's also very new in the series, too. We don't know if the Inquisitor is a master or if he is an apprentice. I mean, there may be 2 apprentices out there who we haven't met yet, or his master whom we haven't met yet. So we're only in the first season of Rebels.
Well, would the Emperor allow another master in his chain of command?
If the master wouldn't be in his chain of command if it's a master, it's essentially they would be at odds. So it's kind of like there could be more than one master and apprentice, but they're not going to share a room. If they're put in, it's like 2 beta fish in a bowl.
Yeah.
And, you know, in episodes 3, 4, and 5, obviously the Inquisitor wasn't there, so, you know, he could be off within, you know, this is in between, you know,
Well-
1, 2, 3, and 4, 5,
And,
and 6.
and that's what we learned from Darth Maul, right? I mean, when Palpatine finds out that Darth Maul has been like training his brother, right, in the Clone Wars,
He's a rival.
I mean, he just goes after him. I mean, regardless of what their intention is. So I think it's a matter of like, how well do you keep yourself hidden? And it's not really a great idea to announce
How
yourself.
useful are you?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Obviously, the knowledge in between, because Vader knows the Inquisitor's existence.
Well, so what I love about, at least, so I ignore everything bad about Darth Vader and only remember the fact that he's Anakin. And I think that he acts like that on many occasions. When you talk about, you know, the relationship between Sidious and Vader, I do not see that in the same way that Darth Maul or even or Count Dooku. I never, ever, ever got that same impression with Vader. I mean, I feel like he went down that road because he lost everything that he had, and he's like, well, I guess I'll just do this thing for now, right? Until something presents itself that he's an inauthentic Sith. I'll say that.
He's just this evil dude in red.
But I don't think he is.
I didn't catch any
Well, in the movie he was, absolutely.
Well, we don't get motivation.
Yeah, I mean, Vader's on screen for like 10 seconds right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very, very.
And then he takes his mask off. He's like, I'm your father. Like, okay, well, that was unexpected.
Any other questions?
And I just, on the council, I can't remember which one, they made a difference between Sith and Dark Jedi. The Dark Jedi were on the dark path, there were different parts between Dark Jedi and Sith. It was one of those weird things that, in the expanded universe, that never really got explained too well.
Well, I think you walked in late, the expanded universe has been thrown on the ground by Disney.
And the last con I was at, there was one of the writers who got the announcement he was writing for, and now it's dead.
Right.
It made it really interesting, from his point of view as a writer, writing the books, the changeover was really interesting, how he discussed that.
Yeah, so everything from the expanded universe is kaput now, as far as the movies are concerned. They may steal from
Unless
it.
they want to cherry pick.
Right, exactly. And they probably will cherry pick, I'm going to guess, because there's so many good ideas out there in the expanded universe. They'd probably be silly not to leverage some of them to make some money.
Well, just with the cross lightsaber thing, you know, with the whole metal
right.
bands.
Yeah.
They're going to cherry pick the lightsaber destroying metal out of it.
Did they kill all the comic books? Like, did they end at whatever issue they were at and are going to be rebooted?
If it's not Rebels, Clone Wars, or the original 6 movies, it is out.
Yeah, Marvel's just going to start up new.
What's up?
Marvel will just start up a new series. And just not,
Is Dark
just
Horse
leave the
out
Dark
now?
Horse one behind. Yeah.
Everything is out. That's no longer canon for Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
They've
If-
made
if
that
they-
very clear.
If they want to play around with like earning money for the fan base that's there, maybe they'll do collections.
There have
of
been
them, because
authors
they'll
who-
have the collections.
Right, they own that.
There
Yeah.
have been several authors who were in the midst of writing works for the expanded universe that have stopped. They've quit based on that announcement. So,
Wow.
anybody? Questions? Comments?
The gentleman in the blue, have you, I know you've been tempted several times. Did you want to jump in here?
Just wondering, is there any resolution as to whether I'm shot first?
I deliberately did not wear that T-shirt to this panel.
He shot first. Let's make that clear.
Yes. Officially, George Lucas has stated that he shot first.
One thing that I never quite understood, is the Sith merely someone who has gone over to the dark side,
No.
like a Jedi, or is the Sith actually some kind of alien that's not part of humanity? Were they separate?
It's a master of the dark
It's
side.
more of an acceptance. Like it was Sisters of the Outer Night or what was the name of them? The planet that Maul and them came from. That was.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey, look at him. We have the world at our fingertips.
I know. Why wonder things when you can literally just get the answer?
Human, just like everybody
Yeah,
else.
they were
Or
supposed to be
whatever.
like.
Well, they're whatever.
Whatever race. Yeah.
They could, just like Jedi, they could be any race if they could force manipulate. So,
Okay, but they didn't come from some far corner. of
They're not some
the
specific
universe.
alien race.
Dathomir? Is that?
Actually,
Yeah.
there were books on Jackson, I think was his name. He wrote he serialized some books from 50,000 years previously, and there was a race of six. So
Well,
they came then the dark.
In the expanded universe?
so thinking about the art, I want to say it's the 70s. There was a comic book series, and I really should, it's in my collection, in which a Jedi goes looking, the Sith have kind of died out in this
As far as I know.
timeline, right? And he goes looking for their relics to try to understand them. And in the process of doing so, ends up the spirit of a Sith appears to him and speaks with him and gets him back over so that there's a Sith Lord on the earth at that time. And it's a very, there's kind of almost that idea in Christianity, right? That there's these things, whatever Cain and Lucifer came up with, right? That there's this knowledge that's available to you if you choose to go that path of darkness that will open up this new world to you. And to me, that's always been my understanding of, as old as Cain and Lucifer, is this idea that the Sith possess knowledge that the light side, those pansies over there on the light side of the Force simply just don't understand. And if you would, then everybody would go to the dark side.
Or is it just that the dark side opens up the possibilities if you're willing to forego your own kind of and your own.
Oh, you seriously give up a lot to go that way, which is why I think Anakin never does. I think he makes a terrible Sith. I think he never goes that way. And I think that part of the reason he wears the mask, sure, it's the whole breathing thing. I think part of the reason he wears the mask is because that's not him. That without the helmet is Anakin. And as soon as he puts on that mask, he's somebody else. And I'd like to think that it gets more fleshed out as the universe continues. But I think Anakin makes a terrible Sith, and that's why Darth Vader was on screen for so little time as Darth Vader.
We have a 5 minute
Yeah.
warning.
Everybody has a bad day.
Well,
They were getting up.
I think one of the things of the prequels is I think that idea could have been done really effectively. This whole idea of his broken heart over this woman that he loves and give anything for. But like the two actors and the way the script was crafted was just not done.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be much more Othello. I thought it was going to be much more Othello, and it didn't.
I mean,
It turned out to be more Twilight.
but
That was well described.
yeah, it's like we're forced to suspend disbelief that this angsty, whining teenager, and we now know that Luke comes by his angsty whininess legitimately.
Right.
You know,
Genetics is a scary science.
yeah, let's face it, this was a feeble-minded kid who got played. And then woke up one morning, it's like, I'm wearing armor, I'm on the dark side. How did that happen?
Right?
I mean, that's the problem. We had 3 movies trying to build in complexity and
Yeah.
explain. No, this weak-minded kid
Yeah.
got played and woke up one morning and discovered he was a Sith Lord.
Yep.
No, I mean he got played by a pretty ruthless.
Well, yeah, but
By a master who,
no offense, if you're one of the ruthless bad guys, that's what you do. You prey on the feeble-minded. It's easier.
Yeah.
It's even hinted at that he was possibly created by Palpatine.
Yeah.
An accurate conception.
Yeah, the Metachlorians, yeah.
For instance, that could have actually been done by Palpatine. He played before birth.
Yeah, I know. What he's not like.
this is the problem is, he has this vision and cherry picks the good parts of these first 3
And
movies.
I ignore
He
it.
says they're genius, and then he just sort of ignores
I
all
know
these awful
everything
things.
else, yeah.
Yep. But
It's
it
good
was.
though. It's a very optimistic way to look at the
Right?
universe.
I'm a happy guy. I will not kill everyone at the Jedi Temple at some point.
Yes.
Actually, I think the way they used Palpatine was excellent because the seduction was always obviously there. I mean, Palpatine was very good at convincing Darth Vader that he was being used. And see, Palpatine never lied. He didn't lie. It was true.
Yeah.
The Jedi were using Darth Vader. He didn't lie to them. He merely exaggerated it so he could exert his own control.
Yeah.
Well,
But
you
it
know,
wasn't all lies.
to quote Dark Helmet, evil always wins because good is dumb.
Good is dumb.
But also,
So-
now that you guys are talking about it, do you see Luke's arc as kind of Anakin's, well, obviously, you know, it's his redemption ultimately, but what I mean is, whereas Luke starts out, you know, whiny and petulant and grows, you know, and learns along the way. Anakin started out whiny and petulant and then went
Devolves.
off the rails
Yeah.
and only to be redeemed ultimately.
Well, Luke didn't have the Master Palpatine
Yeah.
pulling his strings.
Exactly, so
Yeah.
that's my whole thing, is,
And Anakin didn't have Leia to smack him upside the head. Like, he got really stupid.
But Luke.
One second. She was first. Go ahead.
This may track this in a little bit different direction, but Joe, you mentioned that the script is not going to be able for everybody. And I think the better the writing, the closer they're going to get to providing something for the widest possible.
As long as the dialogue's good, people can identify it. It's if they imagine that somehow in science fiction you have to do dialogue differently than the rest of humanity, then it will fail. But if we can relate to it as people, then it will bring in as many people as possible.
They've got good people writing it now,
Yeah.
so.
And I think that was a big secret, a big part of the success of the first three, 4, 5, and 6 was they wrote good movies.
Yeah.
They happened to be science fiction
Right.
movies, but they had all the appropriate
Yeah.
elements of good storytelling.
Star Wars is really the
thing,
Seven Samurai, really. So.
Yeah, the hardest thing for Disney is going to be like railing in the whole committee part of it.
Yeah.
Like, just letting the creators that they hire
Oh.
good creators create instead
Right.
of like that's going to be the
Micromanaging.
Micromanaging.
That will be the tough part.
Speaking of the Lego.
Yes.
You look at the first 4, 5, and 6, and the iconicness of Vader, ignoring all the prequel build-up to that. So Vader's moving through, and he's a badass, and he's bowing to the Emperor, and you're thinking, well, Vader's bowing to the Emperor, how much badass is the Emperor? And because he's such a badass in the movies, and they're fighting against him, and he's defeating the rebels, and they're like, it makes the dynamic of the movie greater, because you're like, he's so cool, you want to identify with him, but you also want the good guys to win. So they need to build, in this next series, they need to build a badass that was the iconic stature that Vader was.
Well, they've got good writers.
Yeah.
I think they've got that taken care of, as well as we can imagine, I think. Certainly better than the first three movies. Darth
Right.
Maul is about as two-dimensional a character as you could possibly
Oh.
have. So.
We're being cut.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're being cut off.
Thank you.
One more question.
What?
Back there, you were first.
One of my favorite aspects of Star Wars Story Riders is Lucas has a strong friendship with Joseph Campbell, the master of mythology. There are chances he was trying to pick up that mythological dimension again. So
Yeah, he was very much into myth and mythology, clearly, in the Joseph Campbell myth and mythology, and he even talked about it when he was making Star Wars, how that was a good portion of what drove him to create these characters, were these mythological icons and whatnot. I don't think that the writers who are writing it today have that kind of association. I could be wrong. You could go look it up on the internet or something. Maybe they do have a lot to do with myth and mythology, but I don't think so.
Well, and keep in mind that people are, because of the internet, everyone can be so much better well-read now, so it's hard to know what someone is, right, carrying around with them as they contribute in these panels and conversations they have behind the scenes. You know, what we may never know is how much they brought to the table.
the character building is straight out of Campbell's old Bible.
Yeah.
It's a classic story archetype.
Yep, yep.
Right.
It's been stolen many times.